So Mr. Alexis Drogoul is here, so we can start. Sorry for the delay. I'm very happy to have all of you in this room for this final restitution. What is not a final restitution, to be clear, because the project will be fully finished in 2 months. But we will try to explain the methodology we follow and also the first result based on the around 70% of the data we analyze during more than 1 year. First of all, I would like to invite the European Commission for a welcome speech, if I can say. If you want to have a, or it will be better for the camera, I think. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone here in the room. Also, good morning or good afternoon for those online. So I'm Khun Duchato, I'm head of cooperation at the EU delegation to Vietnam. So ladies and gentlemen, so I'm pleased to be here with some of you in the room in Hanoi, which is possible due to the excellent handling of the health crisis by the Vietnamese authorities. So, but it's also good to see that we can connect remotely with all of you around the world. So this final workshop focuses on the research on inequalities and environmental changes in the lower Mekong River Basin, conducted by IRD, as you all know, the French National Research Institute for Sustainable Development, in cooperation with WANASEA. It's also an initiative as consortium supported by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union, which consortium of at least 15 European and Southeast Asian partners, including universities and research institutes. This research has been carried out under the framework of the €4 million research facility on equalities, which is funded by the European Union and implemented by the Agence Française de Développement, AFD. And this research facility has been launched because it became apparent that we had little knowledge of inequality in low and middle income countries. So the main objective of the facility is to broaden the knowledge and understanding of economic and social inequalities. And we worked with local research centers that helped us to carry out research projects. For more information on this program, we invite you to visit the website of the EU AFD Research Facility on Inequalities, where you will find the results of all these different research projects. The specific work on equalities, inequalities, and environmental changes in the lower Mekong River Basin has been carried out over the past year in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and we will hear more about it soon. The purpose of the research was to document the existing inequalities in the lower Mekong subregion, to assess the interaction between environmental changes and the local population and its impact on poverty and inequalities. For example, Vietnam has done very well in poverty reduction, but there is still a lot of work to avoid multidimensional inequality. Beyond the learning about inequalities in the lower Mekong area and the links between environment and poverty, the follow-up discussion on how to use the project results and experiences to formulate research and capacity building activities is highly relevant for the European Union. The global strategy for the European Union's foreign and security policy recalls the commitment to fight poverty and inequality. And the 2017 European Consensus on Development makes it a priority of EU development policy to eradicate poverty and to tackle discrimination and inequality to ensure people's ability to seize development opportunities. And right now, the EU is preparing its new cooperation programs for the period 2021-2027. That's our 7-year budget in the European Union, which also includes funding for global action. Hence, the inputs of the research presented today are very timely, and we're looking forward to the conclusions and recommendations of your research. This will contribute to the development of more suitable policies to address poverty and multidimensional inequality in a context of environment degradation and climate change. So I'd like to specifically thank IRD and its partners for the organization of the workshop and the final presentation, and for the commitment throughout the research project. So thanks again, and let's have a successful afternoon. Thank you.
I would like to invite my colleague, Etienne Espagne, from the French Development Agency in Paris, to say a few words about facility and this Mekong research project.
Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this final workshop, almost final workshop, as Stefan emphasized, of this project on environmental degradation and the link with inequality, social inequalities in the lower Mekong region. As was mentioned, it is a project which is part of a European facility. It is one of the few projects funded by this facility which really tackles the topic of environmental changes and inequalities and their interrelations. And there is nothing so evident in this environmental change inequality nexus. So the first point is really to understand what the scientific evidence says. And that is just what we have been trying to do here in this project by using the methodology of a systematic review. The ultimate goal is really to support evidence-based decision making for public policies, but also development operations such as those conducted by AFD. I would just add that there are good reasons why we have been taking also a regional perspective, especially in the lower Mekong region. As James Scott, the anthropologist, emphasized, it is a very integrated region in many respects. It was even called by him Zomia, as a single entity. So doing this systematic review analysis is really good to assess what the science is saying, but also what is lacking in our understanding of this environmental change inequality nexus. And as will be developed further today, this 1 year work could be the beginning of a more ambitious project on this nexus for the years to come. At IFD, we are developing the concept of a just transition as a key policy concept that would allow us to integrate social and environmental policies together, both in our research department, but also in more concrete terms in our operations. And I think this project is really part of this objective to operationalize what just transition operations could look like. So I want to thank the EU again for supporting this project. I want to thank ERD for allowing it to have this regional proportion very easily, and of course WANASEA, who offered its network of universities and talents in the lower Mekong region. So welcome, and looking forward to this final workshop.
I'm pleased to introduce and to invite Mr. Alexis Drogoul, the representative officer of IRD in Vietnam and Philippines.
Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to be here today for just almost 1 year after the first discussions which led to this project. And I'm very pleased also to have been able to play a key role in the not only the management, but also the organization of this project throughout the region. Because for IRD, it is something I would like to highlight and emphasize in the future in the different projects we will be working on. So basically, IRD is present in the region. We have 4 representations in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. And the project itself has one more country, it's Myanmar, actually. But it is something that we would like to work on in our different activities, is that IRD is becoming a major actor in sustainability science, and sustainability science is really about being able to bring some scientific evidence to tackle the different scientific development goals, sustainable development goals. But we know, all of us, that the real challenges do not really lie in these individual goals. So all the challenges we have been witnessing, all the challenges that have been exposed in this project, really lie in the interactions, what is called the nexus, the interactions between these different goals, so be it social, environmental, or economic goals. And what is really emphasized in this project, and what we would like to promote in the future, is the ability to work a little bit more closely between disciplines, between expertise, maybe being able to bring a little bit more physical science to social scientists, and a little bit more social science to more exact scientific domains. Because the development challenges lie exactly in what is the title of this project. So the combinations of social vulnerability and environmental degradations. So for me, this project, although with respect to the kind of projects we're working on, it's a small project. So the funding is not so much. The duration is very short. It's only 1 year. Well, a little bit more than 1 year, actually, due to COVID-19, but it's another story. So it's a small project, but for me, it's really a milestone in how we can handle this kind of research at the regional scale. And probably Stefan will talk about it a little bit later. A milestone in that we have been able to combine expertises, we have been able to combine research, we have been able to combine to make a number of scientists bring their contribution to this project, whatever the domains they were working on. And so I don't know exactly how I will use the outcomes of this project, but I know I will use them at least to show other researchers and maybe other institutions with whom we are working, how we can combine, how we can handle in an interdisciplinary fashion development issues, and how maybe it changes the way also we can tackle them or solve them, or help to solve them at least, by bringing new scientific evidence to policymakers. So I would like to thank a lot AFD, and especially Etienne for his very, I would say his enthusiasm at the beginning of this project, and he has been able to maintain this enthusiasm throughout the project. So I would like to thank him for the work he has done, even if I know he would have liked to come to Vietnam to work a little bit more closely with the teams here, but it was not possible. So I would like to thank AFD also for supporting this project and funding it. And of course, a big thank to the team present in Vietnam, so Linh, Stefan, and Diepan, for basically working very, 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 how can I say, seriously on this project. I see Stefan.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, No, so really to dedicate themselves to this project, which was not completely evident, again, due to the restrictions in terms of travel, because we are talking about many different case studies. We're talking of a project between 5 countries, and not being able to physically interact or physically visit the different sites and case studies was a kind of challenge when it came to summarizing actually the conclusions of this project. So again, congratulations to all of you. You have been incredible and wonderful. And I wish it's only the beginning for maybe other projects or a continuation of this kind of project that Stefan will be able to introduce a little bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis, for this word. We will come back to Etienne Espagne on the Zoom for a short speech, maybe 15, 20 minutes, as you want. Etienne, can you hear me? Are you here?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so Etienne will introduce the Mekong project activities following the slide you can see on the screen. Etienne, it's up to you.
Can you see the slides well?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I don't really know how long it will take, but probably much shorter. So thank you, Stefan, for letting me introduce a little bit the methodology that actually Lynn knows much better than me now, and she will develop in much more details what she's been doing throughout the year. So. So we already mentioned the genesis of the project, that it's part of this European facility for a research program on inequalities in developing emerging countries. It's one of the few projects among this European facility which try to tackle really the link between environmental changes and inequalities. Has been coordinated by AFD from Paris and implemented by ERD and the Erasmus Plus project WANASEA. So let me go directly to the point. So the idea of this project at the beginning was really to try to build a systematic mapping and systematic review. You will see the difference on inequalities and environmental changes in the Mekong region. The main outcomes we expect, and we almost have right now, as this preliminary scoping review and systematic mapping, then a systematic review on a subtopic of this environmental change and inequalities nexus. And in parallel, we were very ambitious. We have launched a call for a book, a collective book, because we wanted to have also case studies which would illustrate some key aspects of this environmental change and inequalities nexus. So we will present that later on, but there was also this collective book initiative in parallel of the huge work of the systematic review process. So what is exactly a scoping? What are exactly a scoping and a systematic review? This kind of method appears in medicine and biology a few decades ago, and then diffused a lot to all other disciplines, and more lately even in social science. The idea is that systematic reviews use a transparent and systematic process to define to define a research question, search for studies, assess the quality and synthesize findings qualitatively or quantitatively. So basically it looks like a literature review, but it's not like a literature review. It is really exhaustive. That means that there is a search in several key databases, in our case for both academic literature, but also gray literature reports and even books as well. The search uses an equation, search equation. There are tools to ensure that the search is accurate, so such as the test list, but also if several people are searching, we make sure that they have they're doing the same kind of choices to select the relevant literature. All exclusion has to be justified. And then in addition to a conventional literature review, there is a very critical appraisal, which can even be quantitative sometimes, of the results of this literature. So this has been more or less the process of the systematic review part of the project. So we have been discussing a year ago the framing of the topic, the identification of the databases. We have been developing the equation, what is called the test lists. The test list is a small number of key papers that we should find anyway in our search. So it's a kind of way to ensure that our search equation is accurate. So this test list is not chosen just by ourselves. We use the help of experts on each of the fields of this environmental inequalities nexus. And what Lynn will talk a lot about is the Pico equation. So you discover how this search equation is built. Then there was a long time for Lynn. I'm just describing your job, Lynn, here. Sorry. There was a long time of search online for and on the different databases for this literature, and it appeared that we had a huge number of papers. I don't remember the exact number, but it was more than 10,000. And after that, you have to make you have a whole process of screening, which is in the three phases. Abstract screening first, no, title screening, sorry, first. So you just, based on the title, you see if really the paper is about the topic you're looking for or not, and you reject some. Actually, you reject just a few there on the title screening. Then you have the abstract screening, so you read the abstract and you reject also. And you end up having to read the full papers, and there was still a huge numbers of papers at this stage where you have to screen the paper and search for all the quantitative elements that could actually give some information on this environmental inequalities nexus. So this takes the longest time, and all the way through there is a discussion with our experts committee to ensure that we were making the right choices. So for a one-year project, as you can see, and with a collective book in parallel, it's quite an ambitious endeavor. So we also are thankful to a team in the region in the 5 countries that we analyzed that helped us and helped Lean gather the relevant literature and analyze it and select it, because we analyze not only papers and books and reports in English, but also in French and in all the languages of the region. So I will probably mispronounce some names, and I apologize in advance, but we are thankful in Thailand to Mr. Sompong Asakit, Mrs. Nele De Wild, Mr. Shannon Knun Nuntawan, and Dr. Charlotte Trenk Hinterberger. In Vietnam, Mrs. Phung Diep Anh, Mrs. Clara Julien, Bui Tito Huyen, and Mrs. Chanti Huong Tham. In Cambodia, Mrs. Tan Boravin and Mrs. Vandanet Hing. And in Laos, Mrs. Kanana Fafone Fakuntong, Mr. Phizit Yalart, and Mrs. Phung Yong Van Vongtong. So again, I have to improve on the pronunciation. I apologize. And in Myanmar, we had Mr. Nguyen Han Thun and Dr. Min So. So as you can see, behind this search, there is really a huge work in terms of filtering, analyzing, and reading the literature. So it's I think that it's a gold mine that we have now, and it can only be the beginning of more research and more developments after this systematic review, and we will see that with the presentation of Lean's work. We also, of course, thankful to the expert committee that was mobilized during this review. The expert committee was consulted for the test list, so the key papers that any search equation should have found in any case. They were present at the kickoff meeting, and we had also a specific expert meeting on November 2019 to discuss the search equation with them. Among these expert committee, we were especially thankful to Christophe Gironde and Daniel Hayward, who have also helped during the process of the systematic review. So we stop here and let the key experts talk. So Lynn, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Stefan, for the introduction, and thanks, Etienne, for the overview of the project and also the first idea of the method we have been using. And I have to confirm again, it's not my job alone. So I have got like a lot of support in terms of management and also in terms of the content work. So Etienne and Stefan also join us in the screening, and then you look at the team from 5 countries. So, and the expert committee have been like getting a lot of email from us asking for their input and then back and forth. So just go directly to the detail of what we did, and some first reason that we had based on the 70% of the article have been screened. So I take the personal kind of like it a little bit apologize when we say it final workshop, but the reason at the moment is kind of on progress, because we underestimated the amount of full text that we got after the abstract training. From the beginning, we predicted we would have 1,000, but actually at the end it's 7,000. So actually it took out more time than we expected. So we will go further. So before Etienne was mentioning about the, when we started, we have the test list. And in that way, we formed the Pico. So Pico is the tool we will use to search on the database. And the Pico was actually formed based on the our discussion with the consultation from the experts. So the meeting in November, and some of you were here before to discuss with us what keyword that we would like to include at the Pico. So the idea was the link between environmental change and inequality. And based on systematic review, we need to identify the populations, the exposure, the comparator, and the outcomes. So based on the discussion we had with the expert committee, so we identified the population trying to include as the most comprehensive list of we could have. Of course, during the search, we also include some more additional keyword because we realized that there's certain topic we didn't think of before. So if you could see the population, sorry. The population here, we actually include quite comprehensive list of the group of people and also the keyword that could get us to the literature that have been researched. So some research is talking about the vulnerability of the peoples. And the exposure here is the environmental change and also sometimes the policy and the rival. For example, here is land reform or the land policy in different countries that actually affecting the ethnic and the highlander. Then we have the comparator because sometimes the research is not directly talk about inequality, but they compare between different group of incomes, or they compare between before and after the disaster event. So in that way, we identify the sign of inequality. Just to note into the literature available, not many research directly use the term justice or inequality, but somehow they have get some comparisons or idea about different group of people getting affected more than the general populations. Then we have like different terms that could actually come out at the sign of inequality, and we call it the two-way relation because we also identified some literature that link between the how different group of people are facing difficulty. Because of that, it affects their effort for conservation of environment. So some ethnic group in the highland of Thailand that they cannot join the idea of how to reserve the forest because the forest is their source of income. So that also the second relation we also look at. Data search have been carefully recorded. So I have searched on based on like 9 different database online. Then we also search on website institutions and some special journal as well. Then we have the special thing about systematic review in the Ray literature. So that's why we have the support from 5 different teams. So over there, they based on their knowledge and with our discussion, they also go to the website and sometimes visited the office in Vientiane Chang or in Cambodia or in Chiang Mai to gather some other information like thesis and as well as report. So this will be the the result of what we had. And as Tian mentioned before, we have more than 10,000, and actually we have the 18,300 when we finished the search after 2.5 months. And it's all being put into Zotero. And at that moment, Etienne, Stefan, and I, we started the title screening, and we took the approach that we try not to exclude too many. When they say this title, maybe yes or no, it's definitely a yes. So that's why title screening, after duplicate remove, it actually go down to 14,000. And then after the exclusion of the title that definitely not relevant to our topic, so we have like 13,000. Then we enter the abstract screening by reading the abstract and tell whether that article or that report is not relevant to our work. So we had, after the abstract screening is 7,000. Then Actually, this one will not be presented today, but we have a lot of data about on media or blog posts or a post on an institutional website, but it's not formed as an research analysis or scientific base. So we took them out as separate reading. Then we have in Thai language and in Vietnamese language. Definitely, we were asking for Laotian, Cambodian, and Burmese language too, but the amount of literature was not that much. And somehow at the moment, from the beginning, we just decided because we could not recruit people from like in each country to look at 5 different articles. So we decided we had Thai people to look at the half of this database. And there's still some struggling between communication so far. So the data I will present today will only based on the English and some Vietnamese actually, because Vietnamese, I could read it myself. So the article of English going for screening is 6,000. And we started somehow in June. And together with a team from, with the support from Yip An sitting here with us here, and then some actually joining us today probably from Chiang Mai and from Ho Chi Minh. The communications of how to screen the full text were, I have to be honest with you, it was quite difficult to explain and then try to understand each other that we should have the same idea of what criteria we would take as inclusion or exclusion. And this is the criteria of inclusion that we took out by reading the full text. And we definitely the basic information. And then when it comes, so it has to have the populations, so people, and then some environmental issue, it should also present it there, and there must be an impact on those people. And we also take out the some information about the timescale disciplinary that also for further analysis of what we have on our database. When you look at here, so the green part here, it's actually looking at the quality of the items. And the quality of the item will go only for the systematic review. Before Etienne was mentioning that we have 2 parts, which the first one is scoping. We only look at how literature has been presented. So we do not look so much into the quality. But then on the second part, we will go down for specific question, which we already identified one about land tenure right in the region. And in that way, we will look at closely to the quality, and we know there is bias on that. In that way, those activism article, report interview might not be included because we look at how consistency being presented in the article, and mostly scientific base are more having that advantage. So I mentioned before, we have this questions at the second step, which is the relation between tenure right and the impact of land water use change in the regions. And this will be the second step. And definitely in our database, we also have other topic being popped up quite strongly, is climate change related and pollution related. Under this scope of research, we do not have the capacity to go further on that, but that would be, the database will be there. So definitely if someone would like to look closely on that, and that would be the advantage we have. So today I will present to you the scoping. So the scoping review is more to have an overview what have been researched in the area. So if you look at the study year we have been looking at, we do not have any limitation on the scoping, but of course when the systematic review coming in, we will narrow it down to the period after the 1980 or 1990, after the Agrarian, like agricultural innovation in the region. Then the item we have managed to screen so far and analyze is more than 4,000. It's left with this amount. And after screening, we include 1,535. with the certain amount of article or report or book that we could not have the access, we try to access as much as possible, but sometimes it's not available. So this is the amount that we do not have the access. PEO1, which is the first relations, how environment impacting the people, that we identified this amount of relation. And then there are 227 cases that we identify how people getting a limitation to join any effort for conservation of the environment. So that would be the second relation. And when you look at here, of course, mainly we definitely having the bias, but also because of the word of publication have been based on the scientific based publication. So we have a lot in journal, but we also have the report and book section and book and thesis and conference. One thing we also need to mention that when we see a review, we do not take the review directly for full text screening, but we looking at their reference to take the original empirical data. So look at geographical distribution of the study. So far, at the moment on this screen, I do not include those articles looking at the global scale, Southeast Asian scale, and Asian or Mekong scale. We also have those articles, but majority the article focusing on countries. So we have actually Thailand had the majority of the articles so far, and we have Laos and Myanmar having less publications on the topics. So by looking at, we already see the distribution, there could be some discussion behind, so there are probably more problem in Thailand or in Vietnam, or whether it's the problem of the capacity as well of research and publication. So where the relation is investigated. So looking at the literature of those 4,100 articles or reports, we see that many work have been done in the rural area. And then the second one, it actually happened a lot on the highland mountain with the majority actually article talking about the case in Thailand and Myanmar. Laos, Cambodia as well, but somehow in Thailand we have a lot of research. It's also being explained by the fact that there has been different programs on, for example, the Mekong Land Forum is coordinated by Chiang Mai University. So there's a lot of knowledge being produced by those programs. Then we have, of course, there's some other last representation like for peri-urban area, but somehow we could see from this perspective that the focus of the research so far in the region. If we look at only the human population that being investigated as kind of being disadvantaged compared to the other in the whole community facing environmental issues, then you could see from the beginning, actually the farmers and smallholder are actually the one. It could be the case in like farmer in rural area facing climate change. Also farmer is being affected in the highland due to the national park protected area, frankly saying kicking them out of the area because it's being protected. Or some different like land concessions in different countries, giving the right to the private company entering for new crop cultivations or new project like mining, and then somehow losing the people, their livelihood farmer. And if you see here why we have the category of community in general, because there's some, we still considering those articles because they are talking about different group of people are at risk, but not specifically talking about a certain group of women or children or ethnic groups. So that's why we use that also as a category. But somehow over there, they have some implications saying that group of people are at risk more than the other, but it's not very much detailed. So for this exercise of like scoping, we have this a general idea, people having a sense of inequality, but it's not so clear. Then, and also like here, we should see the ethnic Highlander and the four. They are very much presented in our search. Like how there's a lot to our surprise, there's a lot of research about the highland area, especially like as mentioned before in Myanmar and Thailand, and how ethnic community are being affected by different investment and also natural disaster and other environmental change. Agrarian change is also one of the changes we mentioned. So sometimes people also can benefit by changing the crop, but because of that contracting to the big companies, certain group of people are losing their livelihood because they cannot keep up with the market. So just some example. We also have quite a number. I just mentioned because it's like kind of limited, but somehow it's really interesting topic by looking at the fishers in Tonle Sap or in the coastal area of Thailand. And somehow they are getting more problem due to definitely the change in the water, the reduction in fish resources, but also the competitions between they fishers at a small livelihood and then those companies coming in. We also having like refugee and migrant as the topic. The non-citizenship were recommended by the expert from Thailand, and we also find several articles talking about that, but not that much. Refugee, like Burmese refugee in Thailand, also can get into trouble with having disadvantage during the environmental situation. So you could tell that, of course, there could be overlapping between these categories, we know that. But the issue, our approach is to keep the original idea of approach of the article of the research themselves. So the research is targeting the refugee, the research is targeting the migrant or the worker. So we would like to keep that. So of course, we could see that they are overlapping over here quite a lot. And indigenous, Stefan mentioned to me that the work is not very nice in some sense. There's a lot of discussion behind that, but there are articles and reports are using this work as the key term on their analysis, and also using it as the, like those local people are losing livelihood because of the development. So I mentioned several before, but when you look at here, how we categorize, or we actually took these keywords from what we read, we identified them before and we figure out more terms during the way. And at the moment, it will go to be a bit complicated to go too much in detail, but it will help us later if we focus only on land later to analyze further. So even you see inland, we see different category of environmental change. So it could be a change due to land reform and policy. And this is one of the key, happen a lot in Thailand, Vietnam, and all different countries. Like when the government starting to kind of like implement their legal governance of the resources in their way. And sometimes customary rights are being considered, but it's not very much considered in the way that support those people to sustain their livelihood after the policy. So just to mention that, because Myanmar also talk about customary land, and also the laws on Lao government also talking about that, but somehow the implementation is saying otherwise, how they consider the right of the local people. Then we have the water, and hydropower definitely was in. And we have different like air, I took it out, the pollution actually here, but somehow it is out here because it have a certain focus recently. Based on the literature, we have that it's one of the growing topic of interest. Climate change, natural disaster, and the health, we also include that as kind of the idea of like one health the United Nations mentioned. So it's also considered as a change and an issue to the people. So at the moment, we are actually looking at different outcomes and the impact on those people. So we group them into different categories. Would be the well-being. So sometimes they just cost their life because of a health issue or a flood issue or tsunami. And then we have different on displacement and migration. Another one would be kind of presented strongly in the region so far. Based on our rate would be on human rights, and then the right to the resources, to the land, to water, and to fish resource and forest. Different social issue also mentioned, even though it's quite slightly, like how environmental change or the change affecting their social cohesions or their culture. They are losing the culture by moving to a resettlement site. The gender, like women being also the topic of different analysis, but not very much. The recent capacity, when we look at, for example, climate change literature, adaptation, capacity, resilience is one of the big topics so far. Vulnerability as well. So we say by looking at the focus on different groups and how this impact is influencing the people by the environmental change. So we see the inequality in there, even though they don't say it's unequal or just. The terminology is somehow new in the region. This is a bit, I know, headache. So just try to look at the color here, that you would see already the where you see more color or darker color, meaning that we have more article or more work on that topic. So we see here how land reform and policy are actually causing issues and land grabbing in the regions. Then we also have, like, for example, the right. So it actually not only in general affecting the livelihood, but they affecting the land tenure right. Like in Myanmar, they are talking about how to register their land in 6 months, and otherwise you're losing the right, the customary right you had before, because it's not recognized by the government. Conflict is also one of the topics that link pretty much to land reform and policy. And hydropower definitely come up in the literature, being investigated a lot on how they affect the people. If we look at here, the air pollutions and then the pollution issue in general, that we also look at the toxic from mining, cadmium, lead problem, and pesticide or arsenic from groundwater. Then we have like most of the article talking about the health risk to the people or any particular health issues. Climate change appear to have more work on that topic, and we have also some representation in natural disaster. Definitely, somehow land subsidence is missing. We actually like specifically searching for that work sometime when we search for data, and somehow the link between the land subsidence to the population not clear. Yeah, so this somehow, when this would be the main reason when we go, when in our final report, we will definitely go deeply into each category to see that on what field is still underrepresented in terms of literature and scientific analysis. Then the next one, I'm looking at the relation between environment and the populations. So if we could already see somehow ethnic Highlander and the poor and the farmer are being affected a lot by the change or policy or rival in terms of land. And hydropower is still presenting a lot, and it's a lot talking about like the community in general, but not specific to certain community or group of people. Then we have agrarian change as well. Climate change is still the strongest one, and it's affecting different groups of peoples. And somehow the women, children, the women also being presented a lot in terms of climate change topic, and the children as well, but in the air pollutions, but not very strong compared to the other group like the poor or the farmers or the ethnic in the highland. Or sometimes it's ethnic, sorry, I always saying that putting like ethnic group and the Highlander together, but we also have ethnic group in the island in Thailand as well, getting influenced a lot by the water policies and the right to extract from the resource. We have a lot of research on tsunami, and definitely it look at the Pacific in general, but of course Thailand is one of the big cases. So tsunami also not only talking about the community in general by affecting their livelihood, but also talking about their land right after the tsunami. They are losing the right to their land because they cannot through it after the disaster. So in general, of course, like mentioned, this is a temporary kind of conclusion so far. It will be cut down into specific one when we are looking at different category like land or water issues. But in general, we already by scoping, we look at the what have been presented a lot in the literature, and then what is missing. And like Etienne said, we hopefully this will create a pool of resources for future analysis. And from this research, we're definitely looking closely on land tenure right issue for forming the systematic review where we look at the quality and look at the data for qualitative synthesis from that. And from that, we already create some scientific base for policy action or recommendations. Sometimes it's also like Yiban and I have this discussion before. We also have like elite group or like rich group. It really like only one or two articles talking about them, like how it's what the case in tsunami, wasn't it? Is somehow the richer population could not get much support because the support somehow targeting the poor population only. So in that case, they become the disadvantaged, but of course, rare situation. SME, small medium enterprise, and definitely somehow article on refugee is still missing. Like there's some, but not so much like in the number. So later on, if we look at like different case, like for example, I just took out the climate change case. So we actually looking at like how literature have been focusing on the poor, the smallholder farmers, and women also presented quite strongly in the publications. And last publication have been talking on this group of peoples. And somehow the heat issues related to climate change and adaptation policy and how it's impacting the population. A policy itself to adapt to climate change or adapt to environmental stressor, it actually influencing certain group of people. Like for example, in Ho Chi Minh City, we have that case of urban upgrading, and it actually losing because of compensation resettlement policy is not closely or comprehensively support the people after moving, and it costing the livelihood of certain group of people in Ho Chi Minh. And in terms of climate change, we see a lot of work on vulnerability, adaptation, resilience in general. And gender issue, yes, there are, with not that much right issues. On social disruption, not only in terms of their financial issue, but also their capacity to access to the capital, like the physical capital to sustain the livelihood or to maintain the cultural relation with their livelihood. Like they have to move and then they cannot maintain their social cohesions. So that would be the current discussion that we actually come out by the screening. And again, apology for it's like incomplete so far at the moment based on the 4,000 screening only, but we are now working on that, and hopefully in 2 months we could have that result in place. Thanks a lot for your attention, and hopefully it's clear.
Can you re-explain the comparator, like how?
Yeah. Do you mean the criteria comparator when we look at, the comparator supposedly for systematic review is a must when you screen the article. If there's no comparison between before and after the flood, or between different group of people like poor and the wealthier, or between different regions, it should be a no to that article. But somehow, based on what we see, look at our database, there's a lot of work. It's specifically talking about one group of ethnic community, like Karen peoples in the north of Thailand. And in that way, they do not compare with any Thai community lowland. And somehow that article is still pointing directly to our son of inequality and disadvantage that group is facing. So we still include them. So we're doing some change in the methods, definitely. But in theories, in systematic review, the comparator is the key quality check. Yeah, there's a question from T-Part. Have you caught the relation between environmental change and well-being or inequality?
I can elaborate if you want.
Sure.
Maybe I missed it, your presentation. Well, first of all, thank you. It's really impressive, the work that you have been able to do. Let me shift on the video. I was just wondering, when you look at the relations between environmental change and well-being or inequality, do you have a measure to know whether these relations are always positive? Let's say, so environment change lead to decrease of well-being or more inequalities, or whether this relation is negative? I think it would be interesting, because I think in the region, not all environmental change results in more inequalities or less well-being, you know? So I'm just wondering whether you have coded this information.
Yes, thanks a lot for this question. We do code the two relation, but this is to not from based on our 4,000 screening, that so far the relation is more to the directions of negative impacts on well-being.
Okay.
Yeah, even though there's some, there are quite a lot, there are also some research or like report from the government talking about how agrarian change or the policy changing to rubber plantations is actually enhancing the income. But then but the majority would say there's some group of people losing in that market relations, new type of environment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe to complement on this, I don't know if it was the question you had in mind, Jean-Christophe, but this is not really a meta-analysis, in the sense that you would try to infer from the scope of literature statistical assessment of a specific relation, such as in your case, environmental change and well-being. But it is a prerequisite to do a meta-analysis. So for example, in this case, if you consider this particular axis, you could just choose the sub-part of the scoping review that Lynn did, and build your own statistical inference based on this sub-part. So that's why I said that it's a gold mine, because there is more to look for into to exploit this repository. So a key outcome is really this repository of literature that you can further exploit on different subtopics. And
Thanks a lot, Etienne. And we also have a question from Yung Yu. Yeah, you're asking about the aspect of gender equality in research and the challenge we found. To be honest, so far we do not look so much into the content of detail on what kind of challenge, but definitely we see the gender aspect are being investigated, and it growing interest same as for pollution issues. So we say growing interest because we look at the time when the publication being on. So recently there's work on like how different gender being affected differently by hydropower, by tsunami disaster in general, climate change as well. So if you the graph before we saw the relation is gender deviated impact is always having a slightly more color. It's not like the darkest one, like having a lot of literature one is climate change, but it is. If you want to respond to that, or like you could also.
Hi. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Hi. Thanks, Chiling. I'm new from the MRC. So thanks a lot for responding to my questions. Yes, that is interesting to know. So I'm quite interested in your finding regarding to the gender impact in hydropower. So I don't know how can I get to know more about that in your research? Do you have any draft of the reports that we can maybe share a little bit or know a little bit more about your findings? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and nice to meet you, Ms. Yung from MRC. We have planned to have a working paper reporting what we have done on this scoping and systematic review, definitely. I'm a bit hesitant to say there will be a lot in depth about gender inequality or equality in that report, beside to show how much focus that have been appear on the literature. But of course, we are willing to share with you the database on that, and if we if there is interest that we could also have some sort of like a bit more in-depth viewing. But so far to say, yeah, there will be a report or working paper, and we will be sharing that with you definitely in 2 months.
Okay, thank you very much for very comprehensive research and the result. I would like to add a question whether you include already the natural resources, the change of the natural resources and livelihoods of the people, for example, in the protected area or natural park or something like that, and people living around the buffer zone, impact of climate change and upstream development or something like that, and it change the impact on the livelihood of people there. And the second is I haven't seen any anything about the sand mining. So it's also a very big issue, not only in the Mekong Delta, but also in the Mekong River, from the upstream to the downstream. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tilo. Thanks a lot. And the first question you have, yes, there are quite a lot of literature in terms of, we also screen that topic, like how livelihood of people living outside of national park or protected area, or the other would be really strongly presented in Thailand, like how the livelihood being how their livelihood being affected before and after the policy on protected area took place, because they cannot access the forest as before, and some ethnic minority, especially in Thailand, getting into trouble of how to maintain their livelihood, and compensation or resettlement, or sometimes in the literature it's a displacement in the negative sense, is also being presented in our research. And if you look at here, we have the national park and protected area, and even though the color is lighter, but you see here, for example, the conflict between the government and also the local community is being presented quite strongly in the literature. We also have that sometimes people talking about the access to the forest or forest, the right to the forest also being presented a lot. And it's not happened a lot here in Vietnam, but like slightly presented, but in Laos and in Thailand, and I remember in Myanmar as well, they also talk about the right to the forest and how that right are not being considered enough in the policy, or sometimes being considered, but it's not in the implementation, or the way implemented is not yet enough to sustain the livelihood. And thanks a lot to mention mining. Like throughout my presentation, sometimes it's not really, I do not cover all, but you see here mining. It's also, it includes both sand mining and other mining throughout the regions. And definitely the color doesn't look, there are quite a lot of articles on that. And sand mining, to my kind of memory, I have to say that after reading quite a number, and there are quite some, but not many literature on that.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation, and I have a question. I'm sorry if I missed something during your presentation, but I'm wondering about the biases that you found during your research. What are they? Because you mentioned that when you review too many articles and books and any other literature, you found many bias. So what are they? What are the major bias that you found? And how to justify the reliability of all the articles that you read, and to see what will be the suitable data for your research. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bias here, I would put it two kinds. The first kind would be on the bias of the nature of the publication by itself. So we also have like governmental report to tell how good a project has been to the region. We also have the article strongly criticize the government or development project because they are standing on the side of those losing their livelihood. So those having really big bias, and they do not have any other view from the other angles at all. The other bias would be on scientific bias if we look at closely to the methods, the consistency of the analysis, and sometimes by one of the example would be by looking at only one communities, and they are trying to collude for a general populations of like ethnicity in terms of hydropower development. So that would be scientific bias in the content. And thanks a lot for mentioning again, like how we going to deal with the quality. Like mentioned before, we have two steps. The first one, just to look at what have been there in the literature. So it's called scoping review, or it's called systematic mapping, where we do not care much about the quality. Yeah, because, and then when we go for systematic review, and systematic review only possible for specific question. We cannot go for systematic review for the whole environmental change and inequality. So that's why we took this topic as kind of a case that we look at in our program, so Tenorite. And in this second step, we care about quality, and that's why we have the criteria as the kind of to check for the quality. So we need to check like the comparator, if there is, the matching is good and consistent, and the sampling precisions, and any modifier, any influence that could create bias from the analysis or from the conclusion of the author. And in that case, we could include the paper. Yeah, so this has been developed based on the training we have on systematic review in theory, and also some adjustment based on our topic as well. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the question from Thomas Krause. So he just wondering about waste issues and the pollution from leakage and burning related to water pollution or air pollutions. Yes, first of all, the first thing is about the air pollution. Definitely cover some of the burning issue, the burning factors in the region. It causing the air pollution, and it included in air pollution. And the same for some water pollution, also cover the leakage for the waste issues. And we could see the waste order in our category, in our table would be go for like solid waste. But somehow it's also a topic that's still not very much found in our search or screening.
Number question from outside? Okay. Or maybe later, yeah. Let's, if there's no more comment or question, let's have a break, coffee break. For maybe 30 minutes. We'll have time to talk a little bit. And after we will have 2 more sessions, what very short about collective book we will produce beginning of next year. And after another session about how to use this research project for to set up another one at a different scale in Southeast Asia. So see you in 30 minutes and have a good coffee. Okay, so only a few minutes from my side to present some output. As you know, as Ling mentioned previously, we will have some output from the Mekong Research Project, especially working paper and 2 policy briefs, but also a collective book, including the scoping and systematic review we did, and some study cases in Southeast Asia, continental Southeast Asia. And in the only a few slides, I would like to introduce this publication. So this collective book will be on inequalities and environmental changes in the Mekong River Basin. Will be published at AFD edition in Paris, in co-edition with IRD Marseille. It will be an electronic version, but also paper. We will print the book in Paris, and a few hundreds will be sent to the French Development Agency in Southeast Asia, in Phnom Penh, Hanoi, and Bangkok, and maybe Vientiane too, and maybe Rangoon. So, as you can understand now, our work is also a synergy of different institutions, and we include this dimension in this book. We will have 8 different chapters. You will read it on the screen. Our part, I mean, Ling, Etienne Espagne, Alexis Drogoul, and myself, we will have a publication on the scoping and systematic review. So it's IRD, AFD, and WANASEA synergy. we'll have also a paper, a chapter from Chiang Mai University and the Australian National University. Another one, the chapter 3, will be from our colleague from Canada, University of Ottawa, and also from Quebec University and Laval University. The chapter 5 will be what is quite interesting because the author is a researcher, but he's an activist too. So we try to moderate him a little bit to have a nice publication. But it's very original publication because he takes data from the field, really. And from Myanmar, as you can imagine, it's not so easy to do that. The chapter 6 will be from our colleague for Chiang Mai University, is Daniel, who is with us, I suppose. And the last 2 chapters will be from Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne, France, and Bordeaux University and Lausanne University. No. Okay. Okay, this is, I would like to just to show you the study cases we will develop in this collective book using this map. I think is more friendly to show it like this. We will have the first chapter, sorry. Here, the systematic review result. It's, there's no arrow because we will consider all the area, the study area of our research, and will be until your right in the impact of land and water use changes. We will have one study case around Young Basin on social identities and unequal vulnerabilities. We will have one more in the utilization of sand pumping in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. The chapter 4 will be in Laos in 2 different sites from our colleague from Canada about mining exploitation. And on this slide, the study case in Myanmar, the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor impact on the land disposition in Tang Tea Farming Society. Another one in Thailand. This is the paper of Daniel about intensify maize production in this area, 3 sites. And the last one, but not the last one, the chapter 7 in the Mekong Delta. We'll develop some question around the rural-urban migration in response to environmental changes. And the last one, it will be a macro study case on Mekong region about inequalities and environmental changes. And that's it. And that's it. Just, you know, it was only a few minutes to explain a little bit more about this collective book. So we anticipate the publication maybe in March or April, max. Okay. We change now, we move now to a new session. My colleague, Benjamin Buclet from CREED and myself, we built a presentation, but Benjamin recorded himself to introduce a new project based on what we did on the Mekong research project. We try to, so the name ETIS is Environmental Transition and Inequalities in Southeast Asia. This topic include, as the Mekong project, Vietnam, so 5 countries, the Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar countries, And also, we will keep our eyes on China during this 6 years project. You will see it's a very ambitious project. It's a 6 years project, including research, that means PhD candidate and master degrees, but also capacity building and communication, dissemination. And maybe we will try to, during this 6 year project, to develop a new, to design a new profile of how to make research. And we call it a PhD 4.0, what is quite original for research activity. But let's go to the video clip and let's learn and hear about Benjamin Buckley talk.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Buckley from CREED. I'm happy to be almost with you to conclude your day of work with the presentation of a project we've been working on for more than a year now. The project is called ETIS, for Environmental Transition and Inequalities in Southeast Asia. My presentation is organized as follows. I'll first give you some elements of background and context. Then I will explain why the project is important and present the proposed approach and the planned activities. Finally, and quite quickly, I will present the foreseen organizations and a quick presentation of the Gantt chart for the planning of the activities. This before telling you how you might want to participate to the next steps. So first of all, a few elements of background. This project is the fruit of more than 20 years of experience in different professional areas. Its foundation are constituted by about 10 years of research in human and social sciences, 10 years of academic research, of course, but in the framework of international scientific cooperation programs. You know, this kind of program where scientific activities are really embedded in strong collaborative frameworks where human relationships are key to success. And during these years, gradually, capacity building became central in our activities, to the point that we got involved in this project 10 Days, which has been implemented from 2009 to 2017, based on the organizations of university level summer school dedicated to human and social methodologies research. This is actually where Stefan and I met. He was responsible for this project in Days, and I was at this time head of the capacity building department of IRD, Institute of Research for Development. And IRD was supporting the Tamdao Days. This project lasts almost 10 years, and when after in 2017, it became clear that it was time to scale up. So this is when we elaborated WANASEA, an Erasmus Plus project, Water and Natural Resources in Southeast Asia. This is WANASEA. More precisely in Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. WANASEA really complemented the Tamdao Days model with networking activities, targeted training sessions, and a very strong articulation with non-academic stakeholders. You can see here a picture of the participants of last year's Asian Water Platform, which happens annually. It gives you an idea of the scale of the project. It was in Phnom Penh, and actually it was when we started the elaboration of ETIS. We started ETIS with a problem tree workshop that happened in Phnom Penh this year, and this is how we started to design the project ETIS. So here we are in the middle of WANASEA, thinking about the future. And this is, in fact, the first component explaining the context of ETIS. Because as a matter of fact, it happens that we have eyes and ears also, and we live on the planet, the only one we know, where we can live. So Earth, and this is a planet where pollution, destruction of ecosystems and species, loss of biodiversity, and of course the global warming and related hazards. It's a planet where we can see increasing inequalities within and between countries. All that happening around us, things that now are measurable in a lifetime, in our lifetime. We can measure it, experimenting just the few years of life we have had. All this, while scientific truth is being challenged, sometimes by the most powerful people. I'm thinking of the soon former president of a big power in the world, and also by a mass of people. More and more people believe that Earth is flat. There is even a flat Earth society that has been created, joining 15,000 people. And all these elements, looked at in the mirror of our professional lives. I exposed these elements have raised many questions, and maybe the main one would be, how is it that with all the scientific knowledge we can access to nowadays, how is it that the situation of our societies in relation to nature and environment, in relation to such unfair socioeconomic situations among us, how is it that the situation reached such a critical point? Have scientific communities done something wrong or missed something? And most of all, could scientific communities bring something to contribute to the solutions? So basically, this is the context of ETIS. A context where it is urgent to reposition science here in the center of the game and improve the way science is considered. The proposal is to produce knowledge differently. So, of course, this proposal is quite ambitious and calls for a large-scale initiative. And this is precisely what ETIS is about, a large-scale initiative. We will work at regional level in these 5 countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, countries that share economic, geopolitical, and geographical characteristics. We observe a common trajectory of economic growth, a common geopolitical constraints and opportunities among these 5 countries, but also relating to their neighbor, China in the first place. And of course, sharing similar ecosystems and biotype characteristics that contribute to some kind of cultural and social unity among their diversity. In sum, this context of interdependencies make really a strong case in favor of a regional approach to promote a serious long-term development strategy being consistent with both social and environmental sustainability. Okay, so in this context, what is the rationale of our project? Here's the joke. Environmental transition seems to be a bit like sex for teenagers. Everybody agrees that it should happen, but they don't really know how to make it happen. It's not from me, it's has been said about big data, but it's quite the same thing, environmental transition. There's a perfect consensus, a broad consensus about action, the need for action, but we don't have solutions to cope with so many interrelated issues. global warming, climate change, pollution of ecosystems, loss of biodiversity. Moreover, increasing inequalities all over the world, but particularly in Southeast Asia, actually, we've looked at the figures. Increasing inequalities make it hard to formulate realistic and acceptable socioeconomic transformations that would be called by environmental transition. So we should add other issues to be taken into account, such as, of course, the global economy, the integration of these countries in the global economy, what we call progress. What does progress mean, actually? We can talk about well-being. Some talk about happiness. These are questions that should be integrated in what an environmental transition should be. Of course, all these issues altogether appear so relevant and their complexity so much exacerbated by the actual situation of the pandemic. So the project ETIS that we've been thinking about for a while really makes sense in the actual situations. And I would say it even become an emergency to do something. So for us, facing all these complex and interrelated issues, our conviction is that knowledge must be produced in order to inform profound transformations of socioeconomic systems, addressing the complex understanding of how inequalities and ecosystems interact with each other. This is basically the rationale of the project. So what is the approach and what are the activities? ETIS is a 6-year project based on a 4 wings approach. 4 wings because it looks a little bit like a butterfly. But yeah, a butterfly. The first wing is about knowledge production. It is about undertaking an ambitious and extensive production of scientific scientific knowledge on the different dimensions of the inequality environmental transition nexus, topic that you probably have been talking about all day long. So this is what it is about, the production of scientific knowledge. We fall into the field of sustainability science, also called science of interactions, definitely interdisciplinary. The idea of this production is to understand the relationships of ecological and social phenomena. And it is important to say that the main research questions will be defined within the ETIS scientific unit based on the results of the project Inequalities and Environmental Changes Nexus in the Mekong River Basin. So what you've been talking about all day long will be one of the key elements that the scientific unit, I will present later, the scientific unit, will work on to define the main research questions. In terms of activities, there will be this, the first step will be the establishment of a high-level international scientific committee, which will be responsible for the definition of these research questions, also the definitions of the PhD subjects, and which will be also responsible to accompany the project all 6 years, and also to write a white paper which will be the conclusion of our project. We will have the international recruitment of 30 PhD candidates coming from the 5 targeted countries, but also from Europe and Canada. We imagine that maybe 1/3 will be from Europe and Canada and 2/3 from Southeast Asia, but it's entirely theoretical so far. And also 19 master's degree candidates who will after that start PhDs once the machine is launched. And at the end of the project, we plan to launch a demand-driven call in order to strengthen the laboratories who will which will host the PhDs and the master's degrees. The second wing is connection to society and networking. It is about linking researchers and their institutions to other stakeholders. This is definitely innovation for us, is to look for direct integrations of findings into concrete actions, collective practices, and public policies. The idea is to undertake PhDs integrated to an ambitious framework of activities. This is what we have called the PhD 4.0 in reference to the concept of Industry 4.0, which is really a connected way of producing goods for the industry and knowledge for us. So you can look in detail at these ideas in the concept note you probably have under your eyes. In terms of activities, it is about establishment of a communication team dedicated to engagement and integration of non-academic participants in research activities. We have to be realistic about our limitations. So we need to have professionals to accompany us in these communication issues. This is not something we have learned in our universities. This is about writing the white paper I was mentioning earlier, a white paper on how to implement the environmental transition in a context of socioeconomic inequalities, and the writing of annual learning papers. The third wing is communication and dissemination. The idea is to go one step further once we have connected research to society and through networking. The idea is to go one step further and make it possible for other people beyond academic circles alone to use the knowledge produced. Okay. I'm a bit lost in my presentation and I'm recording here, so it's awful because I know I can't look at you to see if you understand what I'm saying. I'm just looking at the wall in front of me, so it's really not easy. Okay, so yes, idea to make sure the use of knowledge is possible, we will work on the format and visualizations that scientific knowledge takes and do much more than writing scientific papers or do academic presentations in colloquium or conferences. The objective is that scientific progress should be considered as its true value by decision makers. This is really the point. So activities are planned as follow: 2 regional fora for academic and non-academic actors every year. Two of them during the project, resulting in collective position papers. These are moments of meeting between the academy and non-academic actors. It seems easy to say, but it's very hard to organize and to succeed in that. Creation of, creation of communication media, creation of illustrations, infographics, photos and videos, website, SEO, search engine optimization, also management of community, management of press relations. So this is what we foresee for communication and dissemination. And the fourth wing is about capacity building and intense capacity building effort. To ensure leverage effect, because the idea is that it's not a one shot, even if it would be a 6 years one shot, so maybe 6 shots, but anyway, it must be sustainable, as we say. Okay, so we need a strong capacity building to start a virtuous cycle leading to this science-based monitoring of the environmental transition. So the idea behind this capacity building efforts is that skills needed to do good research go far beyond scientific skills only. Communication, legal issues, how to write proposals, how to manage resources, human and financial resources. All these peripheral skills are often missing in higher education institutions in Southeast Asia, but not only in Southeast Asia, I can tell you. So this is what capacity building approach is about. And concretely, it will be webinars, training sessions for PhD and master's degree candidates, but also for research managers and people who really do the job. And we will also do that through 3 regional summer schools organized in a closed environment to ensure total immersion of participants and also foster intercultural exchanges and networking. All right, so as a whole, why ETIS and why should higher education institutions get involved? So if you're not convinced that the project is interesting and groundbreaking, this is a few elements that I want to highlight. We think that ETIS is the opportunity for higher education institutions to position themselves as really actors of change and really enabling science to influence collective decisions. It is also the opportunity to integrate an international network of institutions committed to a responsible and pragmatic approach to research. This is the idea of connected science. It also implies profound changes in the way research is carried out and in the use of scientific results by economic and social actors. And another important point is that this connected science approach and the idea of the pilot idea of PhD 4.0, these are things that can be replicated in other contexts. It is also one of the added value of the project. And at a whole, the objective is to identify solutions to the most urgent socio-environmental problem faced by humanity. It sounds a little bit dramatic saying that, but this is really what it is about. So very quickly, this is the organizations we imagine. You can see the butterfly down at the bottom of the screen. The rest of it is not particularly original. You know, there is a management unique steering committee, like in any project. I need to add that monitoring and evaluation system will be set up in order to really accompany the project and be sure that we reach our objectives. This is something we are used to. But I want to stress out your attention on the scientific unit, which is probably the innovative side of this organization. The scientific unit, which is a pluridisciplinary group, about 15 high-level scientists, equally from Europe and Asia, and maybe Canada, because we might work with Canadian institutions. This scientific unit will really be involved. It won't be here as a scientific justification. I mean, we are definitely in the middle of a scientific and research project here. There is a lot of production of knowledge, and the scientific unit will not only work on the core science of the project, but also will be integrated in the management unit so that they will be involved in any decisions, and also will be responsible for the writing of the roadmap for the realizations of environmental transition in the context of inequalities. the white paper, this roadmap. And finally, the planning. Well, it's a little bit ridiculous to show planning like that from now for the 6 years coming on, but just to show you that we have more or less planned how it would be organized. Of course, the details have to be defined, and this is precisely what will we do this year. These are the next steps. We will start setting up a support committee with a letter of commitments in principle, expression of interest of stakeholders, academic and non-academic, in Asia, Europe, and Canada. The second step, which might be a very big step, but still, is to constitute a pool of donors committed to support the project. And finally, we will organize a formulation workshop, joining involved partners, which something, if the situation allows us to do it, it will happen in the second semester of the coming year. Actually, for these next steps, we are currently joining 4 institutions to fund, to give us seed money to move on these next steps. So this is already a very, 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 very big satisfaction to know that some serious institutions, Stefan might talk to you about, are involved and almost agree. We are still waiting for some answers, but most of them already got involved, agreed to follow us in these next steps. So finally, I really thank you for your attention, and hopefully, if I can, I will join you on the platform. I think it's Zoom, to participate to the discussion if the planes and the travel allow me to do so. So bye for now, and I hope to hear from you very soon. Oh yes, I forgot to tell you that of course you can see our email addresses, and if you're hungry to contribute and participate to the project, we will be glad to hear from you and to answer you, most of all. That's the point. Okay, bye for now, and talk to you soon, hopefully.
Yes, yeah. So Benjamin, you are with us now, right?
I am with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'm entirely with you because I just get out of the plane, but I'm part of me is with you.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the presentation of Benjamin and I. Just to precise that, as Benjamin mentioned, some organizations are already or almost on board. Already is the Global Development Network based in New Delhi, and also IHEID from Geneva. And we have Christophe Gironde, sorry, with us, and his institute is ready to participate also to the project. And we are waiting from IRD support, but we have 4 scientific departments from IRD who are already okay to implement this first phase through seed money for 1 year, next year. And we hope that the French Development Agency will follow. And I think through Etienne Espagne, we will meet a success on that. So regarding ETIS and what you just hear, maybe you have some comment or question. I just want to mention that I sent to all of you the concept note, the ETIS concept note already. I add that especially for Mr. Singh, who just arrived from Samanet. Thank you for coming. He just arrived and missed the first minute of the video clip. So, but you can come back to the concept note and to Benjamin and I for more additional information. So from Zoom meeting and from the room here, the audience. If you have any question or comment about this ambitious regional project, we are ready to answer.
Maybe I would have one. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Etienne.
Okay, so thanks for the very nice presentation, Benjamin and Stéphane. Of course, it's a very exciting and ambitious project. I have maybe some questions on the concept of a PhD 4.0. Because I understand the idea, which is great behind that, is to have, let's say, kind of political dialogue at the same time as you develop your own research, so that you ensure that it is applied research and really applied research in a sense. But in more concrete terms, how do you intend to implement that? With which kind of institutional counterparties or stakeholders, and how will it happen in very concrete terms? For, let's say, you have one PhD in Cambodia and he's doing PhD 4.0 there. How do you ensure that there is this public policy dialogue happening?
Stéphane, can I try to start an answer? Yeah. Concretely, you know, usually now on PhDs work with PhD committees, comité d'accompagnement. So usually we set up a group of people accompanying the work of the PhD candidates beyond the advisor, scientific advisor. So first of all, the subject of the PhDs in ETIS will be defined by the scientific unit. So there will be a first step where we can try to involve other stakeholders. It's really why we will define the subjects. And the idea is really involve other stakeholders, direct people or institutions or groups. I don't know, it will depend of the subject. But in the definition of the methodology, in the definition of what we expect from this research, so that the work in itself, the scientific work is really embedded in this environment, institutional environment, so that there is a good chance that some institutions or other stakeholders will be interested in the results and will expect the results to resolve some of their problems, I suppose. So since the beginning, and after that, we will have a team of people dedicated to communication and to create connections. As I don't remember if I said it, but we must be conscious of our limits. We are not professionals of communications and networking. Well, I'm not. And this is not something we learn in university, how to communicate well, most of all with the tools that are nowadays so quick and short term and in a way efficient, but kind of dangerous too, to my opinion. So there will be a team of people hired for that, to support the PhD candidates, to formulate his propositions, his work, to help him work differently. This concept 4.0 is really, I mean, it's really a personal, I mean, this is something we just thought about with the analogy of industry 4.0. Which is industry connected to people. So it still has to be thought more deeply, but maybe simply experimenting it, we will you know, find the really specificities of what might become a really groundbreaking way of doing research for a PhD. I don't know. I hope.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I could continue ask more questions on that, but I don't want to impose my.
Well, Etienne, I will build on your question actually.
Okay.
Because I think it's these 30 PhDs seem to be a real central piece of the project, and they are actually.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what you described for the moment as a PhD 4.0 is, as you say, Benjamin, is a little bit fuzzy because it's not completely formalized, and it seems to relate a lot to how we do PhDs in France. For example, this idea of doctoral committee does not exist in every country, and one of the main points is that these candidates will come probably from the 5 countries which are targeted by the project. In each country, you have different rules for PhD candidates. So either you try to define a kind of a new doctoral school by yourself, kind of not terrestrial, but extraterritorial doctoral school, or maybe you try to involve from the beginning, and I think it will be the best solution, 1 or 2 doctoral schools in France ready to play the game, ready to follow in this adventure, and ready to register 30 candidates, probably with a double registration, so in their country and in France, with your own, with a set of rules, and this is something in which IRD can help you, because we already have the PDI program. So PDI, it's a program which has been built with Sorbonne University, and so far we have had 90, I think it's something like 90 candidates in 6 years. With very specific rules. So the rules are defined, it's a kind of agreement passed between IRD and Sorbonne University to enable, for example, the students to come 1 month in France, get all their credits in 1 month, spend all this time together, etc., etc. And I guess in your case, in the case of your project, it would be probably the best strategy to really, from the beginning, involve a doctoral school, ready to register all these students, so that you can at least define some rules. Otherwise, you will have to deal with, I don't know how many doctoral schools in how many universities in 5 different countries.
Yeah.
And probably it's impossible. From what I know, actually, it's very complicated.
Yes, it's definitely the challenge is feasibility, and in the what's happening here? Woohoo! Sorry, I have the screen moving. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, I understand now. In the next steps, we will have to work on that, to think about it first, and then to confront with other people, other points of view, and see what is possible, what is not possible. But it's true, and I thank you for your comment, because it is not necessarily something we had thought about, but it sounds crazy right now in working with 30 different PhD schools, so doctoral school. So that would be fantastic if we can have a limited numbers of rules of way of doing it, and if we can have one having agreements with, I don't know, 15 or 20 universities, that would be great. Yeah, this is something we would definitely discuss during the workshop. It is something that we will have universities, we will have institutions, hopefully companies also, and we will discuss all the concrete modalities of implementation of this project. And 3 days won't be too much, because we have to find the easiest way of implementing all these activities, but also keep to the objectives. And sometimes I can't foresee that it will be complicated, but together we are stronger, so it will be done.
So just to add one point in link with just you said, Benjamin, is why we're asking for seed money budget. Just to identify academic and non-academic potential partner, to know exactly what people want to do regarding this project. And after, to put the main actors in the same place during 2, 3, 4 days at the formulation workshop, as mentioning by Benjamin. But the people who will attend this workshop, Benjamin and I, and maybe some others, we already have the information in mind, and they will follow us. And when the people will sit around the table, they will already know what they can put in the ETIS project. And you know, we will involve all the different stakeholders at the beginning of the strategy, and this is the originality of the project.
Yeah, we have a time dedicated to identify and to convince partners. So people joining us during the formulation workshop will be people that are already, to a certain extent, committed to support the project, or at least to participate.
For example, having the more the most political partners on board might be difficult especially maybe in Southeast Asia. For example, in Vietnam, you would have institutes from depending on the ministries. They are experts. Some of them have PhDs already, and some might be interested in having PhDs. So these kind of institutes, which are not really universities, with more independence and autonomy, are they a target for this kind of PhD 4.0, or not really? Because it's here that the public policy dialogue might really happen.
Well, it's a bit early to say it, but I just thinking with you about it. Yes, they would be targeted. At least a dialogue will be looked for. We will try to dialogue with these kind of institutions. So yes, we will have to find a good balance for this formulation workshop, because there is also here a question of feasibility. You cannot have 200 institutions to formulate a program, otherwise it just doesn't work. So there is we will have to find maybe stakeholders that are representing others and how are legitimate to express some kind of sensibilities or interests. There is still a lot of work to be done, and this is exactly what we will do before organizing it with this with the resources we are getting now with Stéphane.
I think that there's a question from Jean-Christophe Diepin.
Yeah. This discussion is very interesting. I'd like to provide some. It's not really a question; it's more a comment. I worked for 3 or 4 years with a project called the Mekong Region Land Governance Project, based here in the Mekong region, and the project was really trying to influence policies and practices that are more inclusive of smallholder farmers. You know, and there is a lot of discussion here in the region about land grabbing, large-scale and acquisition. So we were really trying to basically discuss and dialogue with policymakers on how the policies and the practices, the implementation of the policies are more inclusive. And so well, it's not really rocket science, but I learned three things that maybe you would be interesting for this discussion we're having now. The first thing is that if you really want to maximize the chance or the linkages between the research, the knowledge production, and the use of the research by the policymakers, you really need to have the policymakers on board in defining the research questions right from the beginning. And of course, expecting that a workshop, when you invite the policymakers, will make will make them aware, sensitive, and ready to change policies. This is a dream that will never come true. This is one thing. Two is the question of time. Very often the policymakers, they have a very different time window and time frame than the researcher. We are here talking about PhD, 4 or 5 years work. The policymakers, very often they have very specific questions they need to answer in a very, very short time. So I think it's very important that you also try to, identify mechanisms to be responsive to this very short-term window. And the third point is that knowledge, well, I'm talking more here in Cambodia, but knowledge is very easily lost within institutions, particularly within ministries. So it's very important also to ensure continuity. If you involve policymakers in this process, making sure that this person has some legitimacy within his ministry to talk and to be heard and to be, and also make sure that this person basically follow the process from beginning to end. Otherwise, if you just get lost in the middle of the process, so all the inputs and the efforts that you have put to really try to have him influence his own policy will be lost. So basically, yeah, these three points I think are important to consider.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Christophe. I think I understand your point, and just let me clarify something. The formulation workshop is really not the moment where the subject will be defined. Mm-hmm. It's the moment where we will just write or at least define the full proposal, detailing, because we have written a concept note, which was quite an effort, to be honest, but which is nothing compared to what needs to be thought and specified in a complete proposal for such a big project. So the formulation workshop needs to involve policymakers, but in our idea, the moment where the subject are defined is a moment that will happen at the beginning of the project once it is funded, with involving other stakeholders, including policymakers, maybe NGOs, maybe groups of people, community-based in some cases, depending of the overall scientific approach that will be defined by the scientific unit. So this is a distinction, an important distinction. About the time, the agenda of policymakers obviously is very different than the research agenda, and I think it is why we need, and it is planned actually right now to produce different things, and not only the PhD. And this is maybe one of the extra effort that must be made by the PhD candidates, is that they will have to work to produce maybe policy notes, or the format still needs to be worked on, but we will have professionals for that. So this is really obvious that we won't have one meeting at the beginning of the PhD to define the subject, and then 4 or 5 years later, oh, this is the result, good luck. No, that's not the plan. And about your third point, this is also why we need to work on the right way of presenting knowledge produced, so that it's not lost. But about you're right, the people can. The trouble is that very often people change in public institutions, and in some cases, this is something you have to deal with. But if every 2-3 years, depending on politician issues or so we have to find a way to work with several people. I don't know. I don't have the magic wand on that, but it's an issue that must be taken into account for sure. Christophe?
No, I just wanted to follow up on what Jean-Christophe said and add on that. I think it's really key to have the policymakers and practitioners really on the forefront, because it will typically enable us to knock at doors such as the Swiss Embassy in Bangkok, for instance. I would not feel comfortable to turn to them and say, look, we have this research project. This I'm comfortable, and I can go to the Swiss Foundation for Scientific Research. Well, that's fine. They have the classic budget lines and projects for that. But if for the project, the big challenge is beyond good or 4.0 research, academic research, is really to engage policymakers. We will be much stronger to get resources and also the support, because typically we know, well, I think most of us have experienced those situations where we try to gather policymakers, but we as researchers, whether you come from the graduate institute or whatever prestigious scientific institution, if it's the embassy in Bangkok who organize an event, well, they knock at doors and they have venues to gather policymakers that we cannot have, even with a rank A publication special issue on environment and inequality. I think it's really, really crucial.
Of course, policymakers, and I would add, if we really want to break the wall, it's the big companies as well. If we have both, it will be very civil societies and NGOs are easier to because they're more used to dialogue with researchers actually.
No, but I fully agree, and we already have.
I know this kind of organizations better, so it looks easier from my point of view. But,
and I fully agree, Benjamin. We already had this talk a few weeks ago, and again, typically, if you go to the Swiss Embassy, then you reach the SECO, which is the Secrétariat du Commerce. That's the Trade Secretariat of Switzerland, and that's the way to try to bring in Swiss companies, for instance. Well,
okay.
Personally, or even the Graduate Institute would hardly get to embark Swiss companies, but the embassy and the SECO can. Well,
okay.
Well, I'm sure they will, but they have far better chance than we.
All right.
Maybe one point on the stakeholders, gathering all the stakeholders. If you want to prioritize public policy dialogue, you may have conflicting views between different types of stakeholders, and you have to manage that as well. So the institutes, depending on ministry, will not have the same opinion or scientific program, let's say, than NGOs.
Yeah.
So this is also a key issue, I think. If you want to bring in.
You're right. You're right. And in our ideal world, I would say that this disagreement would raise questions that could be the beginning of research questions, you know. So it will ask, for sure, some kind of diplomacy and diplomatic skills, but it is important. I mean, nobody can deny that we are facing a situation that must be really resolved, and sometimes, you know, when you have a common enemy, that would be climate change, let's say, it makes things easier so that people can agree on working together. we want to try. Oh, Thomas, hello.
Yes, hello. Maybe I can add something because now, you know, I belong to the French embassy. So I have another point of view a little bit. Previously, I would have talked with my research point of view. Now it will be from attaché point of view. So definitely it is important to have this kind of meeting with political guy, because we know in the French embassies, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, we have scholarships, what we call BGF, Bourse du gouvernement français. And for PhD, for example, it's sometimes easy for us to get some kind of co-funding scholarships. For example, we have that in Cambodia with the Ministry of Education. We have co-funding PhD theses. We provide half of the scholarships and the ministry another half. It's only for PhD in STEM, science, technology, mathematics, and so on. So I think it's the same for your PhD. I mean, if you get this dialogue with a political guy from the ministry, so it's possible to manage from the French embassy to discuss with them after. And why not to define a kind of co-funding strategies for scholarships or PhD, so it will be easiest for you to get this money. That's it. Good luck.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Christophe?
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. That you bring to my mind the PhD issue. I'm not sure it's been discussed already, but for instance, at the Graduate Institute, more and more PhD students do articles PhD. So, and there's a big advantage in the perspective of such a project is that you don't have to wait for 5 years. Let's make it clear, it's a 5 years period of time. You don't have to wait for 5 years to have a big piece of several hundred pages, and because the first, second article can come earlier, they can be more specific, really tailored, and more and better tailored to the project. And I think that's something to be considered. I don't know in the French university how it's developing or not, but of course, you know, here at the Graduate Institute, in the Department of Economics, it has become very common, but also in anthropology, it's on the rise. And also I think that for the PhD students, there's much more satisfaction with this, because they see more rapidly the results, the outcome or impact in the case of such a project.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure it's most of all in social and human sciences. It can be a really big frustration for young researchers to have the feeling that they are working just to feed other researchers and having absolutely no impact, specifically when you work on social issues or inequalities, of course, but also degradation and destruction of the environment and things like that. If you have the feeling that your work will only serve for other researchers to produce papers that will serve you in the near future to write other papers, I mean, you're in a loop that is rather frustrating when you live in this world. So that's precisely the point, to give another scale of academic research. The challenge for me is most of all succeeding in that while keeping the good quality of the research, scientifically speaking, because we don't have to forget that we have to have both. It must not be only a very good research and excellence and meet the requirement of excellence, as we would say. It must be this is the minimum, but also maximize the probability of impact, of effect of through the connections. This is the connected side of it.
So if there's no more comment or question, we can maybe close this session and the meeting at the same time. I would like again to thank the Commission, European Commission, the French Development Agency, IRD, and talking about people. A big thanks to my colleague Lynn, who make a great job during 1.5 years, and it's not finished. In 2 months, it will be finished, believe me. So thanks again for this afternoon. We share all together, and see you next year, at the beginning of next year, for a new project, and I hope it will be this ETIS project. Okay, thanks to everybody, and see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.